Well, hey guys! Thank you to all my subscribers for coming back and supporting the channel. And if you're new here, welcome. For April, we will be talking about catastronauts and everything space. So we're going to touch on a little bit of moon and stars and sun and space related things. And let's get into it. So the first few books are going to be informational books, and then the rest of the books will all be storybooks. So the first one is called Professor Astrocat's Frontiers of Space. It's by Dr. Dominic Walleman and Ben Newman. And I thought this was a great introductory book. It just has every single thing that you would ever want to know about space. It starts with the universe. It talks about the birth of a star. Towards the end of the book, it talks about death of stars. It talks about the galaxies. It talks about the sun. It talks about Earth. It talks about planets like Mars and Neptune. It talks about the moon. It talks about space travel and rockets. And it talks about being an astronaut. And let's see, modern rockets. It just talks about everything. International Space Station, satellites, and how they work. Here's where it talks about some different planets, Mercury and Mars. It talks about life on Mars. It also talks about whether or not there's a possibility that there's aliens out there. That talks about asteroids and comets, talks about constellations. So truly everything that you may want to know about space. Now, it is a lot to read. I have not read this with my daughter yet. I just went through it. We probably won't be going through everything, but what I suggest is picking out pages that look interesting to your child and reading that. The next book is The Moon Book by Gail Gibbons. Gail Gibbons is a pretty popular author. I've liked some of her other books in the past, and I like this one. This one is just about the moon, and it tells you everything you want to know about the moon and how it moves and how it relates to the earth and how it was created. And it talks about a little bit of mythology about the moon and what ancient people thought about the moon, and how sunlight works and the phases of the moon and ocean tides. So really everything you want to know about the moon. It's a great informational book. The next book is called Astronaut Handbook by Megan McCarthy. And this is a really interesting book. I thought it was really well done. And it talks about what it takes to become an astronaut and some things that you should think about if you want to become an astronaut. And here it says you have to decide what kind of astronaut you want to be. And I didn't know that there were different types of astronauts, but there are. So some of them fly the space shuttle, some of them do science, some of them do repairs. So I thought that was interesting. And then it talks about going to school and having to be physically fit and working as a team. You have to be able to work with other people. You have to learn survival skills because you're the only ones out there in space. So that's super important. And yeah, I just thought it was a really well done book for younger kids. The next book is called Shooting Stars by Franklin M. Branley. And this is about shooting stars, what they are, and how you can see them, and what people thought of shooting stars long time ago, and that people make wishes on shooting stars. And it's a nice book, just kind of explains the basics of what a shooting star is. So if your kids are into stars, this would be a fun one to pick up. The next book is called The Girl Who Named Pluto, The Story of Venetia Burney. So this was a little girl who lived in Britain, and the story is about how she went to school and her teacher taught the class about the solar system and how far away planets are from each other. And what they did is they put the sun on the chalkboard, and then they walked out of the school and they tried to walk the distance of each planet, how far it was away from the sun. And little Venetia wondered when she got home. She talked to her grandfather who knew about astronomy, and she asked him, she wondered what was past Neptune, because at that time, it was the 1930s, they had only known up to planet Neptune, and she wondered what was past that. And her grandfather wasn't sure. But then sure enough, the following day, there was something in the paper. A new planet had been discovered by the Lowell Observatory, and little Venetia started wondering what that planet could be named and what it would be like. And the scientists were trying to figure out a name for this new planet. They had called it Planet X, but they wanted a name for it. And so Venetia, because she had studied about Greeks and Romans, she told her grandfather, I think they should call it Pluto. And then she went to school, and her grandfather thought that was such a great name for the planet. And so he went ahead and he wrote a letter to a friend of his who was a professor at the Royal Astronomical Society. And he just suggested to his friend, hey, maybe you guys could call this planet Pluto. And then his friend liked the idea so much that he then sent the name on to some other scientists who were actually going to name the planet. So the scientist at the Lowell Observatory, I believe. And so little Venetia just waited and waited for the news of what this new planet was called. And then February went by, March went by, and then came April. And when April came by, the scientists decided what they were going to name the planet, and they sent a letter back to Venetia and her grandfather, and sure enough, they named the planet Pluto. And because they named the planet Pluto because of Venetia, then they also sent like a grant to her school because her teacher had helped all the kids learn about space. And then the kids got this gramophone so they could listen to music. The next story is Kitten's First Full Moon. It's by Kevin Henkes. I have read a book by him before that we both liked, so I thought let's give this one a try. And if your kids like cats, this one was a sweet story. It did win a Caldecott Medal award, but it's just about this little cat who sees a moon in the sky, and she thinks it looks like a saucer of milk. And then the little cat tries to grab for the saucer of milk, and so the whole story is about this little cat trying to grab the moon but not being successful at it. And then at the end of the story, there she comes back home and there's a bowl of milk waiting for her. The next two books, we're getting down to our favorite books. So the next two books are both called Moon, and they're both about the moon. And this one I thought was very interesting. I love how they have these cutouts, and I think this is great for kindergarten through second graders. And as you go through the story, it shows you the different phases of the moon, and I thought that was so cool. That's really the reason to get this book. The story's okay. It just talks about the animals at night and what they do and how they view the moon at night. But really, it's the phases of the moon that I thought was very interesting about this book. And this one is called Moon, Earth's Best Friend, and it is by Stacy McAnulty and Stevie Lewis. And my daughter really, really enjoys this book. They do have other books like about the sun and the earth itself, but I just got this moon book because the other two were checked out at the library. But she really enjoyed this one a lot, and it just talks about your basic facts about the moon, but it's cute because the moon and the earth are friends, and they give them human characteristics like, you know, a smile and eyes, and so she really enjoyed that. But yeah, they learn just basic facts about the moon and how it does help the earth and how they are friends. And at the end of the book, what I like is that it says, that we are on earth too. And it says, where earth goes, you go. I guess that makes us best friends too. So super sweet book. And then this book was maybe my favorite, I'm not sure, but I just thought it was really beautifully done. It is by the National Geographic Society, and it's called Zoo in the Sky by Jacqueline Mitten, and pictures by Christina Ballett. And so this talks about constellations, and I just thought it was so beautifully done. I like how they do the stars, and it talks a lot about how the stars are grouped together and the animals that the constellations are associated with. And it just tells like brief little story about each animal, what they're doing in the picture, but also like what ancient people thought they were doing in the sky. And really, I just love it for the illustrations. So if you're into constellations, or your kids are and you're learning about it, highly recommend this one. The second final book is Life on Mars by John Agee. My daughter really enjoyed this book. I was not familiar with this author, but she really enjoyed this book, and I did too. And it's about this little boy, or an astronaut, who goes to Mars to see if there's life on Mars. He travels to find if there's life, and he brings a gift, and the gift has chocolate cupcakes. And he says, everybody thinks I'm crazy. Nobody thinks there's life on Mars, but I do, and I'm gonna find it. And then as you go through the book, you see that there's something living on the planet, but this little astronaut he never sees what's behind him. He only sees what's in front of him. And so, as you're going through the book, your child's probably going to be like, it's behind him. And so it was really cute. And then at the end, he gets back on his rocket ship to go home because he doesn't think that he found anything on Mars. Well, actually, he did find that flower, so he was excited about that, bringing that back and saying, look, I did find some life on Mars, but he never found the Martian. And so he gets back on there, and then he says, I think I deserve a treat. And when he opens it up, it's empty. And to go along with Life on Mars, John Agee did another book, and I checked this one out because it looked interesting, and it's called The Wall in the Middle of the Book. And I thought this was a great book. My daughter loved this one too. And actually, out of all of the books that we got from the library, there were 3 books that she picked out right away. These were 2 of them, and her favorite one was also one she picked up right away. But anyhow, so this book is not about space, but I thought it was so good that I want to mention it. It's about this little knight here, and he said there's this wall in the middle of the book, and he tells you why there's a wall there. And he's like, you don't want to go to the other side because the other side is awful and it's dangerous and da-da-da-da-da. And as he's telling you all these terrible things about the other side of the wall, you notice that there's water rising, and he doesn't notice it. And he says there's an ogre on the other side of the wall. That's the absolute worst part. But then what ends up happening is he's like, help me. And then this ogre hears his cry, and he rescues him from drowning and brings him over to the other side of the wall. And then you see what happens. And I won't give it away, but it is a good story. And then my daughter's favorite book was Space Cat. It's about a catstronaut. It's an I Can Read level 1 book, and I went ahead and read it to her. But it is about a cat astronaut who has a robot on his ship. They run out of gas for the ship, and they have to stop and get some gas on a nearby planet. And when they stop, he goes to see the king, and he's like, hey, can you help me out? My rocket ran out of fuel and I need some. And the king says, absolutely not. We need all the fuel that we have for our planet, because I have big plans and I can't give you even one drop. And then he shows him his big plans, and he has these machines that clean the air and the water, and the machines start to break down, and the space cat saves the king's life, and the king says, I'll give you anything you want, thank you so much. Oh, and the robot fixes the machines, and so the king says, I'll give you anything you want, and he's like, we just need some rocket fuel, and he goes, all right, here you go. And then they go back home. But my daughter just thought this was a hilarious story. I thought it was really cute too. So great book, Space Cat. And then as a bonus, there's another book called Space Cat, and it's about another catstronaut. And this book is by Ruthven Todd. And I have not read this yet, so I can't tell you if it's good or not, but it is a chapter book. It's about a little cat who accidentally ends up becoming a catstronaut. He becomes friends with an astronaut who takes him on a spaceship against his boss's wishes, and it's just all about what happens when the cat goes to space. And this guy, Ruthven Todd, he wrote this book in the 50s. And there are other a series of books, so it's like Space Cat Goes to Venus, Space Cat Goes to Mars, Space Cat and the Space Kittens, but this was the only book that I could find, so we have not read this yet. But I look forward to reading it. It's not one that my daughter gravitated towards, surprisingly, but we are going to give it a chance. So I hope that you like this space book list, and I hope that it helps you pick out some books and that you can incorporate some of these books into your learning, and I will see you in the next video.